would like to welcome everybody. I'm really excited about this topic. Hopefully we will have time for some questions at the end. And if we can go to the next slide, I'll introduce my esteemed colleagues. Lee Barrett, Executive Director and CEO for ENAC, and Todd Bailey, Chief Information Officer for CareConvene. And myself, I'm Tim Pletcher, the Executive Director for the Michigan Health Information Network. And we're going to spend the next hour talking about what we think are, really some of the fundamentals for establishing trust and embracing this brave new world of FHIR and APIs at a whole new level. And hopefully we'll have some questions. We'll open up at the end for some questions. The way this is going to work is I'm going to do a little setup at the beginning here for the space. Again, kind of speaking through the MyHIN lens. And then Todd's going to talk a little bit about the role that sort of CareConvene has played, and just spend a few minutes about what CareConvene is, and just sort of show folks how it fits into the ecosystem. And then Lee is really going to talk about what I think is some of the meat of our goal for today, is really how do we automate some of these challenges at scale for really managing some of the trust components. So with that, please welcome my counterparts. Yep, that's just a great mugshot of me. We'll move right on. So again, I'm Tim Pletcher. I'm the Executive Director for the Michigan Health Information Network, or as we call it, MyHIN. And MyHIN is a network for sharing data across the state of Michigan. And it's been around since 2010. And every hard-won battle for getting folks to share things has really been a matter of getting all the stakeholders to trust and do three things: to make sure that we've really got the legal people happy, okay, because that's a prerequisite. Make sure that we've got the technical infrastructure working and functional, and then the sort of third component, making sure that we've done appropriate cybersecurity due diligence to protect what we have. And those three pillars have been something we've worked hard on all the way along. So next slide. So, infrastructure. Infrastructure is one of our most critical components. There's even a lot of discussion in Washington these days about infrastructure. But the kind of infrastructure, or digital infrastructure, we're talking about makes some distinctions about what we want it to be, how we want it to perform, what kind of really reliable, dependable, and scalable infrastructure we have. And these are two pictures. Clearly, folks are getting electricity in both pictures. But if you look at one picture, you can see that it's probably not as predictable. It's probably very hard to troubleshoot. It might be a little less reliable, and it might be hard to really understand what's going on. It would not surprise me at all if not everybody's paying the same amount in one of the pictures. Whereas when you kind of look at the picture on our right, this is infrastructure. This is scalable infrastructure. This is built on standards and predictability, and it's going to hold up to a whole new level of rigor, and you can depend on it a lot more than you really can as you stack things on top of it compared to the picture on the other side. We're going for, in this discussion, the kind of infrastructure that's really on the right. Next slide. So one of the best things about HIEs is we are really trying to reduce complexity. We are trying to improve scalability, and we're really trying to take a many-to-many problem and simplify it by creating a hub. And if you go to the next slide, there's even a magic mathematical formula that says this is a good thing to do. Basically, if you kind of take this hub approach, you have many fewer connections. Whereas if you do a many-to-many approach, you have this combinatorially explosive body of work that just simply doesn't scale. You know, once you're doing under 10, you can do it. Once you're doing 25, it's starting to feel a little painful. Once you get up there around 100, you're starting to break the bank. And once you try to get past 1,000, game over. Next slide. So Myhin is a network of networks. We've got lots and lots, hundreds and hundreds of groups connected. And it is been, you know, a decade since we were created, and we're very proud of all the work that we have done. And we've connected many, many organizations. Next slide. Organizations are really the key word. A lot of the ways we have connected folks to our benefit, even though some of the technology has allowed other mechanisms, but we've historically relied on virtual private networks, or what are called VPNs, to essentially create tunnels among these different organizations to the hub. And there's a process to set them up, but it has worked for us, and it continues to work for us in many situations where we're really connecting an organization to us and then sort of flowing the data to us in a fairly, you know, almost like you're laying a pipe from point A to point B, and, you know, punching a little hole, a little tunnel through the internet between our organization and another organization, exchanging some certificates and securing the ends so that the data that flows through it is this encrypted pipe. And it's very much organization to organization. Next slide. And so when we do something as simple as an ADT, an admit transfer, admit discharge and transfer message, you know, we connect the hospital's system through this little VPN, and all of the admit and transfer notifications flow from that hospital or that EHR directly to our organization, and then we do some things to reroute it to all the other organizations that it needs to go to. And this is a production. We do literally millions of these a week, and it's a very reliable process, and it sits on top of a very robust standard called HL7, you know, version 2. And you know, this works, and it's how we do an awful lot of what we do. Next slide. Then along comes 21st Century Cures Act. This is a wonderful thing because it has good stuff in it, like giving patients access to their information through open APIs. It sets the stage that people can pick what app they want to basically connect to their data. And it is a major source of what we hope will be continued innovation around the healthcare sector. It also says information blocking is bad, which some people needed to be reminded of that, even though all of us knew that for quite some time. And it has some other efforts around improving patient safety and overall transparency. Next slide. Two things that I want to highlight because it kind of set up the conversation that we're going to have as we go forward, and that is there's a requirement to, or an expectation set, that organizations are going, you know, providers are going to register their digital contact information. So they're going to say, this is my FHIR endpoint, and you can deliver information to me at this FHIR endpoint, or you can even gather information from this FHIR endpoint. And they're gonna register this in the same place that sort of their national provider ID is recorded, or NPES. The other thing is that you're going to be required, if you're a hospital, to send out these ADT notifications. Now, that's something we've been doing in Michigan for a number of years now, but many organizations harken back to that information blocking thing. Sending and sharing those ADTs was not a high priority. It really became a requirement in the final rule here. Next slide. So if you click to sort of get all the pieces on this, there's more. Okay, yeah, just click all the way through if you would for me. When you go, not quite that far. All right, when you go and change the world a little bit from this HL7 version 2 virtual private network infrastructure to this brave new world where we're going to use Fire to do a lot of the same kinds of things, it breaks our model. It doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that the way we've been doing things historically have to change a little bit, because we're no longer thinking and acting at just the organization level. We're really acting at a much more dynamic level, at an individual level, and we're trying to not have these sort of static tunnels that are set up from point to point, but we're going to really do a lot more things on demand. And so what is going to happen is somebody's going to go to a hospital, and instead of knowing that when this patient comes to the hospital every single time, they just drop that ADT message into the tunnel and it flows over to MyHIN, there's this extra step where they're going to look in this NPES registry, they're going to find the Fire endpoint, and they're going to use that information to essentially post some data over to MyHIN. And MyHIN, this could happen from any place in the country, which is very exciting. But many of those places we've never dealt with. We've never put a legal agreement in place with. We've never had a transaction from them before. And so suddenly we've got to decide, are we going to kind of take this data from this place that we haven't historically known about? And so at this point, we really have a brand new and very different need for trust than how we have traditionally done this. And so a lot of our conversation is really going to be about planning for this new kind of situation and establishing a really good framework for how to go about it so that it's no big deal and it's actually really exciting. So if you go to the next slide, as part of this sort of scalability, don't just think of it as building interfaces. Now think of it as sort of exchanging trust certificates, okay? Use the same formula, but basically use the mindset of we kind of like the equivalent of a hub, so that we're not exchanging all of these many-to-many kinds of relationships for these trust certificates and things. And so we'd kind of really like to get that hub function back when we trust everybody. And so part of our conversation here is really how do we get that hub concept back and get that scalability across the entire country. Next slide. So MyHIN has a platform that really helps organizations comply with 21st Century Cures Act consumer access kinds of rules, starting with the initial patient access APIs and sort of health directory kinds of access, and moving right along on that continuum to some of the next requirements around prior authorization and payer-to-payer kind of exchange. And we refer to this as the Interop Station. Next slide. And this is a platform where we're expecting that the whole growth in APIs just continues to stack as more and more rules come through, more and more Fire accelerators come online, that this is the future way pretty much all of information exchange is going to continue to happen and expand. Next slide. And as part of these processes, there's always a developer portal. There's a way for folks with a really awesome app that consumers like to use to be able to sort of connect into this infrastructure so we can really comply with that, that consumer API kind of process. One of the interesting things we have found is they're not all lining up to participate. And we've had to go to organizations like CareConvene to say, we've built all this infrastructure, we got all these pieces ready, but can you really kick the tires and make sure it all works for the consumers that use your apps? And to talk a little bit about that, I will now sort of pass the reins over to Todd Bailey.
Thank you, Tim. Todd Bailey here from CareConvene. Happy to be representing CareConvene today. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy to be here with this excellent group. if you could hit the next slide, please. And I'd like to spend the first couple of minutes kind of setting up CareConvene, describing what we are, and I think that will help understand the meaning with access. So CareConvene is a virtual health platform. We have several products. We have ADT delivery. We have care assessments, which are really online forums that providers communicate and talk to their patients. And of course, we have virtual visits, a virtual visit capability. So in addition to those three products, we also have a PHR from a patient perspective. And CareConvene can kind of be looked at as two different entities. There's the patient app that the patient would download, whether iOS or Android, and the provider care team primarily uses a web portal or a Chrome browser. And as we can see here, really what CareConvene tries to solve is access, communication, and coordination. So we want to increase providers' visit capacity, and we want to simplify the patient and provider communication. And then we also want to enable the digital coordination to replace a lot of these in practice situations. So I guess looking at this, it's very evident that CareConvene relies on interoperability very much, whether that's integrations between CareConvene and an HIE such as MyHIN, or RPM, remote patient monitoring vendors, EMRs, and lately, this past summer, obviously with several payers across the United States. Next slide, please. So this is a screenshot of the patient app. So the patient would download this. They have a opening homepage that kind of lists a lot of the encounters that they've been working on with their providers. And then the second one is the PHR. So this gives the ability for the patient to manually input data, but also integrate with certain payers to download claims and procedures and whatnot. And then also obviously EMR. So we have a lot of, again, we rely on a lot of interoperability between CareConvene and other organizations. Next slide, please. This is, the larger picture is the provider portal. And then on the right is, again, what the patient would see. And this is just kind of a snapshot of, again, the health journal and also care assessments, again, which relies on communication between the provider and the patient. And next slide, please. So about a year ago, we had the opportunity to connect with several payers. Actually, I think we've connected with about 12 to 14 payers across the United States. We've also worked with MyHIN, the IO station. And from a CareConvene app perspective, our app allows these US CDI core data pieces in the app. And what we learned is, we've got excellent developers and programmers on the team, and they're very well versed in programming HL7, JavaScript, and Fire. And we knew about Fire for some time, a couple of years, and we were always very excited to actually get our feet wet and get into it. And the opportunity came about a year ago, and then also this past spring with the July 1st mandate for patient access API. And what we learned is, Fire is an excellent standard. We see a lot of good things with it. Our experience with the whole go live and integration with various payers was very positive. But what we learned from experience is, while there's a specification for Fire, it does leave room for interpretation by each player. And each team, whether it's a payer or it's IO station, each team has their own unique technical infrastructure, and they have their own development standards, and they have their own human resources that have different views on architecture. So the experience we had is, you know, if we put it at 12 different payers, I think we pretty much had to almost rebuild the wheel 12 times, because each each payer did things slightly different, even though it was under the same standard. Um, for example, I think we had 3 or 4 payers that use Pixie as an extra security layer on top of OAuth, and that kind of caught us off guard, kind of after the fact. So there was just some pivoting that needed to happen, and just really kind of stretched the project timelines a little bit, just because there were so many different interpretations of that. Um, but in the end, we see FHIR as a very positive experience. We're going to certainly continue to use it. As I said, interoperability in the care community platform is very important. So I think the topic of today should be very interesting to see what plays out of that. I think that is the last slide.
All right, so thank you very much. We'll turn things over to Lee Barrett to talk a little bit about that infrastructure problem and how we see sort of a pathway to really help scale that, everything from sort of the identity component to the authorization component, and baby step our way up to sort of full scale automation. Lee?
Thanks, Tim, Todd. Thanks very much. I mean, very, very good that I think you've both put a lot of context here, which has been, I think, helpful for the audience. So next slide, please. So what I want to try to do for all of you is really talk about how do all the rules come together. I mean, there's a lot that's going on from the standpoint of interoperability. So I want to just talk about some of all of that and how that's all really integrating. And then our responses, you know, from an ENAC perspective, in relation to the programs that we've developed to try to address some of the interoperability issues. And one is called our Trusted Network Accreditation Program, or TNAP, and the other is our Trusted Dynamic Registration and Authentication Accreditation Program, or TDRAP. You can see why we're trying to come up with an acronym there. So, and again, I think one of the things that we wanted to do, I'm going to go through all of this and try to really emphasize, I think, some of the points that both Todd and Tim have been talking about, which goes back to the whole concept and what this webinar is about, is really determining and assuring stakeholder trust with the various stakeholders and actors that are out there. So next slide, please. So really, what we're going to talk about here is kind of what are the next steps here on how do we look to promote, how do we look to integrate, and how do all of these various components, rules, et cetera, that are coming out on interoperability actually intersect. Next slide. So there are a variety of different programs and initiatives, rules, legislation that have come out, and I'm going to talk about some of these in a little more detail as we go further into this deck. But, you know, Kefka, the Trust Exchange Framework with Common Agreement, the HIPAA and Omnibus rules, information blocking, interoperability, and we've got the interoperability roadmap that the Office of the National Coordinator, ONC, has outlined, the FHIR roadmap, and there's a lot that's going on, obviously, that both Tim and Todd have talked about in relation to FHIR. But again, we're also waiting on ONC as they're working on Kefka and the implementation of Kefka and the development of the common agreement to come out with a FHIR roadmap as well as how FHIR is going to integrate with that implementation. Excuse me, and then the CMS patient access rule as well, and how that's also playing a part here. So next slide. So these are all the various components. One of the things I wanted to mention to you as well is, as we're going through this, if you've got questions, you can certainly enter those questions into the chat box, and we'll try to get back to all of your questions when we finish the content here. So next is really to talk about, okay, what this TNAP program that we developed, the Trusted Network Accreditation Program, what we've done with that is we developed this back in 2018 with about 30 healthcare stakeholders in the industry. We all got together as a collaboration, determined what requirements we felt were going to be important to align, and that's an important distinction. We're looking at aligning with Tefka and with the common agreement. Really all of the various specifics that Tefka is looking to outline and to promote with qualified health information networks, the QHINs, and those entities that are going to be participants as well. But primarily the focus is on these QHINs. And so what we did is to put together this program aligning with Tefka, and Kefka first came out, the first draft was back in like 2018, went through another couple of iterations on drafting. And what we've done is we've continued to evolve that accreditation program to further align as new requirements have come out as part of that. And now what's happening is that the common agreement has continued to evolve, and the recognized coordinating entity, they're the RCE of Sequoia, along with ONC, have done a really terrific job of really being very transparent with the industry in relation to garnering and requesting input, sharing information on how the common agreement was in fact looking to be developed. They've gotten the QHINs involved as well. And we've continued to evolve that, again, our TNAP program as Tefka has continued to come out with drafts. And we formed a partnership with HITRUST for the privacy and security aspects of this. So organizations, so a QHIN in this case, would be able to go through the TNAP and HITRUST accreditation to be able to demonstrate their level of stakeholder trust between all the various connection points, data exchange points that are going to be taking place between participants, QHINs, and then QHIN to QHIN. So that's what we've tried to do, and we see all of this continuing to evolve in 2022 as the current thinking is that the common agreement is going through some additional changes and revisions with the RCE and ONC, where they're hoping to, I believe, have a final version of the common agreement at the beginning of 2022, and then start to look at onboarding of QHINs during the first and second quarter and throughout 2022, as those QHINs would look to be not only onboarded, but then look to become operational. So this will become this particular program, therefore, becomes a program to help to raise the bar on stakeholder trust for all the various entities that are going to be exchanging data there. So hopefully that provides some context on what this program is and what we're trying to do from an interoperability perspective there. Next slide, please. So then we created as well, about almost 2 years ago, we started discussions with the organization called the Unified Data Access Profile, or UDAP, .org, to develop an accreditation program. As you all know, there's an initiative called the Fire at Scale Task Force, or FAST initiative. That FAST initiative has been in existence for over 3 years now, and has about 7 different Tiger teams that have been working on developing, I would say, different frameworks and different specific recommendations and solutioning, whether or not it's testing and certification that I've had the opportunity to co-chair, or identification, security, architecture. There's piloting. Several of these Tiger teams have been working on various solutioning. And fortunately, ONC has taken on the role and has worked to really facilitate all of the efforts there. There's been a lot of good work that's been done by all of those Tiger teams with ONC. There's an executive committee as well. And the bottom line is that initially when we started all of this, the OAuth was really the protocol to be using for APIs and for basically moving the whole interoperability needle forward. As the industry has evolved and FHIR has evolved under HL7 and different versions are in play there as well, and implementation guides have been developed, what's occurred is that the whole aspect around security and privacy and assuring the various connection points with FHIR APIs, not only at the API level, but at the server level, has become more important. And the capability to provide for scalability, which is even a more important initiative and objective for this, because the current kind of OAuth protocol, which has been a great protocol and has been used by the industry for a number of years and continues to be used, does not necessarily provide the level of scalability that is going to be needed to really enable interoperability to happen across the entire healthcare ecosystem. So UDAP has in fact moved forward from an evolution perspective. OAuth is still out there, and I'm going to talk about some of this from a glide path perspective in a couple minutes. But what we ended up doing is creating a program, accreditation program for APIs to demonstrate the level of stakeholder trust that people were looking for for whether it's a patient, as far as how they're looking to access various programs, to providers, health plans, other stakeholders and actors as well. So we created this accreditation program against the UDAP profiles, and we've incorporated our privacy and security and created two different programs. One is our TDRAP Basic, which is really for entities, application developers to be able to use, to be able to go through and at least demonstrate a level of stakeholder trust against the UDAP protocol. And then the comprehensive program goes into security and privacy, and as well for larger entities that might want to be going through and demonstrating and going through a number of APIs that they might want to go through this and send through this UDAP interface and engine for validation and compliance. So those are the two programs that are there. Next slide, please. So basically what we've tried to do with this, again, is to look at this from not only an application developer, an individual app developer who's developing APIs for the industry, for the healthcare industry, for various stakeholders, to larger entities, whether it's a health plan or other type of stakeholder that's using a number of APIs, and therefore wanting to go through that level of really accreditation, compliance, and really raising the bar, as I said, on privacy and security for the industry. So that's what we've done here. And again, we've done it both at the API level and at the server level. We feel that really covers the gamut for the industry that's going to be critical. So that's what the TDRAP program is looking to do, is really that good housekeeping seal to demonstrate really readiness on the part of all the various entities from a trust perspective. And again, kind of raising that bar on stakeholder trust out there that we've been talking about. Next slide, please. So why is the program needed? Well, going back to kind of the whole ONC component of this, ONC has been really raising the bar from 21st century cures to their final rule, really where they're focusing on providing and supporting really a seamless and a secure access and exchange through Kefka, through the entire interoperability initiative, and really using electronic health information to do so. The key, I think, as part of this, and the major focus of 21st Century Cures has been around providing patients with greater access to their health information, and providing not only greater access to that information, but the ability to kind of foster and implement really the ecosystem on data exchange that's going to be necessary, and providing patients with a lot more choices and options as far as their healthcare care. And so really that's what this was all about. And certainly the aspect of APIs and how APIs are being not only developed, but how they're going to be exchanged, and the fact that interoperability looks to start moving forward with Kefka and with HL7 and with FHIR, et cetera. All of these various initiatives really start to come together. And we believe that in 2022, as Kefka and the QHINs start to move forward and become enabled, as FHIR starts to take off in relation to more and more application programs and need for exchange between these various entities occurs, that this starts to really take on, from a scale perspective, the type of initiative, the type of momentum that's really going to be needed for the industry to really implement interoperability at the type of scale that we're looking at over the foreseeable future. Next slide, please. So as we look at kind of the regulatory requirements and industry need, the rule really includes a provision requiring patients to electronically access all of their EHI, their electronic health information, in either a structured or an unstructured way at no cost to them. So all the various stakeholders and actors that you're seeing on the right there, between developers, policymakers, patients, providers, health plans, all need to be done in a seamless way. And so that's what we're trying to promote here with these various programs as well. And as Tim talked about, what MyHIN is doing in relation to creating and what they have in place as far as that ecosystem and enabling all of the stakeholders to be exchanging data, that's where we're looking to go. They set out a really great model and framework for the industry to follow as well. And I think they're looking to very much support a lot of the initiatives that are going on, as Tim said, whether 21st Century Cures, what we're doing with the TD RAP and the TNAP initiatives as the QHIN start to onboard. I think that all becomes very, all of the aspects and the key components of what is really going to create this interoperable environment that we're looking to move towards. Next slide, please. So again, from the interoperability and patient access rules, again, as I've been talking, the intent here is for this to create kind of this seamless data exchange in healthcare, which historically has not been there in relation to patient care. And so the whole aspect around coordination of care, outcomes not being at the level that we're looking for them to be in the future, and higher cost is what we're trying to address with all of this. So we think, and I think these are really key objectives for interoperability, is really to enable that better healthcare and patient access, improve the whole interoperability between all the various stakeholders, and to create an even more flexible, innovative environment so that we get more and more organizations involved, and trying to reduce the overall burden on both the payers and the providers as well for managing all this data. So we think, and I believe a key objective here is providing patients with a lot more information, allowing patients to become far more engaged in managing and having access to their information and being more informed and leading to better care and coordination of care going forward and reducing overall burden as well to them. Next slide. So privacy and security, as I've mentioned throughout this, is extremely important. And that ENAC has focused on this for over 25 years we've been in existence. And working with HITRUST in relation to our TNAP accreditation program and partnering with them, both our organizations have very strong security frameworks. And so that is absolutely the key that we're working on, and what we think is, and CMS and the industry is really focused on the privacy and security. And so that goes back to, and that equals a level of stakeholder trust that we're trying to achieve. Next slide. So obviously the whole patient access and API requirements, the intent is to, for CMS is really, the payers and being able to implement and maintain the HL7 the release is 4.01 is what they've stipulated as far as the regulations thus far. And there's going to be continued evolvement and evolution of the HL7 standard. So I'm sure that as it continues to evolve and add capability, flexibility, more requirements as well, then those new versions will in fact be implemented and endorsed as well. But you get all of these entities that I've highlighted here are all involved basically as third-party applications, and how patients are going to be looking to access all of those third-party entities to be able to be exchanging data in the future. And then you've got provider directories, you have CAQH that's developed the health plan directory that's out there, and we've been fortunate to as well have an alliance with them for our TD wrap as they're looking to promote their directory out to the industry, along with our TD wrap as well, along with that of MyHand and Velatura and what they're doing and promoting it out to all of their stakeholders in an effort to, again, raise the bar for all of their stakeholders in relation to interoperability and providing as many capabilities for entities to adopt, implement, and look to hopefully evolve interoperability over the next several years. And so we're very fortunate in the partnership that we have with MyHand and Velatura in an effort to promote this out to all of their stakeholders, as Tim was talking about the infrastructure that MyHand has put in place. Next slide. So it's the issue of scalability, and I've talked about scalability and the importance of it, and that's where we're trying to go. And I think working with, as you can see from what Tim is doing at MyHand and the team at MyHand and Velatura, what Todd is doing to help enablement, what ONC and CMS and the industry are doing in relation to the rules, regulations to promote interoperability. We're very excited for how that is playing out and how we think it's going to be playing out in a big way, starting really, it's been going on for a number of years, but obviously 2022 we think is going to be a big year for a lot of this implementation. Next slide, please. So the TD wrap in bottom line is we're trying to address the challenge on the stakeholder trust and really raising the bar for stakeholder trust, working with the industry, along with our TNAP program. And I think as Tim was talking about a lot of the initiatives that they're undertaking, they are very progressive, and they're really involved with really some of the latest and greatest technology and innovation And so I applaud them as really an innovator in the industry, along with Todd and what they're doing. And we're very appreciative of the relationship there, along with that of ONC, working with ONC CMS, the FAST initiative as well, and how that's going to be migrating to HL7 as an accelerator in the future. So I think that's the end of mine, Tim.
All right. You just got landed on the sort of sign up page for sort of how to get there.
This was just an example of a trusted app and what an entity could look at in relation to knowing that a patient, if they see an app that has this green lock, which you can see down the bottom, they'll be able to know it's a trusted app that's gone through this level of certification for TDRAP. So again, it starts to raise the bar, and it creates a level of visibility for patients as well to know, hey, this is a trusted app that I can that I really want versus another app. So there you go. That just gives an example. And this is kind of the ecosystem view, which I think people can look at, but it's pretty much what I've gone through in relation to how an actor can go through and request information. It takes you through the continuum. But again, I think it puts in perspective the level of stakeholder trust that people are looking for. Next slide. I think that's, and this is the client registration process, or what people could go through and what they would see as far as what the TDRAP is looking to go through as far as the registration process itself. Next slide. And this is the glide path, last slide, which really for all of you says that you can go from 1 star here all the way up to 5 stars. And it takes it from leveraging if you're using OAuth 2 today, you can certainly do that and go through the 1 star for the TDRAP, all the way up to, at the application perspective, all the way up to 5 stars if you're looking at doing not only your apps, but also your client servers to really demonstrate the highest level of stakeholder trust here. So this provides a really good kind of glide path for the industry on how they can look to continue to evolve and demonstrate at the highest level, the level of stakeholder trust to all the various entities. I think that's it, Tim.
Awesome, Lee. Thank you so much. With that, we have managed uncharacteristically to basically have a few minutes left for questions. So we're sort of right on the money. If you want to stop sharing, we'll see lots of bright, shiny faces across the country. And folks are welcome to either type into chat, or if the people who control the WebEx let folks talk, you can try that as well. I don't have the power of the keys on those, so I don't know if you'll be able to talk.
Anybody should be able to unmute themselves, I believe.
All right, Caitlin, thank you. So we can have the open dialogue, or people can sort of, all talk over each other, however you all want to do it, or type things into chat. So with that, I'll sort of open up the floor and see what's coming in. I've got one here. It says, what costs are associated with the accreditation? Is there a renewal expiration process for the accreditation? And I'm going to punch that over to Lee.
Okay, so the basic program is very inexpensive. It's costs $1,200 for an organization, and that's only for a limited number of APIs that can go through that, and that does not include the privacy and security. And for the comprehensive program, that's based upon revenue of the organization, but again, it provides for a very large number of APIs if an organization wants to go through and have those go through the UDAP engine and go through the privacy and security as well. And again, that's all of that information is either on enac.org website, or I believe, Tim, it's on the MyHIN website as well, myhin.org, if you're looking for that.
And we'll mail everyone who registered for this a link, you can kind of get to all that information, so you don't have to go hunt and peck for it.
Tim, I think we're also going to provide, we can provide the slide deck as well, right?
Yeah, so we've had a number of requests for a PDF of the slide deck. We'll make sure that that's available to everyone. And there's also going to be a recording of our fabulous presenters as well. So you can get at all of this stuff as well. It might take them a little while to get it all processed and posted on the website, but everybody who registered will get that. Okay. Other questions? Any hard questions people want to ask?
Are people really liking what we're coming up with as far as programs and how we're looking these accreditation programs, certification, how they're aligning, providing the level of stakeholder trust that hopefully all of you are looking for as well? Any thoughts around that?
Well, I can, we got a few claps and a few folks saying, yes. So the question, Nick says, is the certification process focused on the technical handoffs, use of APIs, et cetera, or are you really looking at the surrounding process? And I guess I'll attempt is what we really want is for you to basically be able to have an app show up and trust it. Okay, that's at the lowest level. At the higher level, we want the server and the sort of permissioning and the processing to actually be very automated. And so as you sort of climb up those thresholds for certification or accreditation, you're really talking about a much bigger portfolio of sort of the ecosystem automatically doing a lot. But at its lowest level, it's just basically, is this app good to go that's trying to connect to my API? So to answer your question, it's actually kind of a holistic approach that sort of starts at the bottom and grows to be the surrounding process.
I think just to add to that, Tim, I think the other aspect of it, as we've talked about kind of OAuth and UDAP. One thing about UDAP at this point that that UDAP is providing is the dynamic aspect that we need from the standpoint of the scalability for the registration, the authentication between the various endpoints as well, which is what Tim was talking about. You've got the API itself, and then you're looking at it at the server level. So it takes that entire ecosystem into consideration as far as being able to scale.
And then I just do a quick shout out, Todd. I think it would have been nice from your perspective if you could have kind of gone through this process once and basically known that your app is ready to go for anybody who's sort of stood up a consumer-facing API. It would have saved time and money.
I agree, yes. It would have been nice.
Tim, can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, hi, Glenn Keith. Quick question. Do you think that there is anything in the info blocking rules that would prevent an HIE or other entity from not allowing a PHR to connect to them that hasn't gotten some level of accreditation? My understanding is there's very few things you can do to block that.
If it looked like it was a bunch of Chinese hackers and it got put on a list that a bunch of sites said was, I can tell you that our organization would work real hard to do the equivalent of making an untrusted site. Okay. And so I think while technically there isn't any specific language there, I think there are a set of best practices that if we get a reported app that's actually a villain, we'll put it on a list and block it. And I'd be happy to go and explain to the Office of Civil Rights why we were following one of the other provisions in terms of privacy and there are some reasons that you're allowed to sort of reject in principle. And if we thought it was going to violate one of those other reasons, we couldn't do it without that. Although I think what will happen is a standard practice, not on day one while all this is early, but a year from now, we're going to make a really concerted effort to talk to our legislative folks and say, hey, we don't see any justification for untrusted, unaccredited. If the bar is low for people to be trusted and certified, we don't see why we should let them into all of our systems.
Thanks, Tim. I agree with that. I think the hard thing will be not the villains, but maybe they want to do right, but they haven't yet taken the time to really certify themselves or check that they're in good shape. That's where I have my concerns.
And I think it's an evolutionary period where, unfortunately, some folks are going to get burned by letting some apps in that do bad things with the data. Okay. And I think once that happens, you're going to see a tremendous backlash. And what we're trying to do is just sort of head that off.
Great. Appreciate the webinar. Thanks.
Hey, good hearing your voice.
And Tim, my audio did cut out for a second, but just wanted to make sure, did you see Amy's question in the chat and respond to that about the EMR vendors? So Amy from Spectrum was asking, are you seeing any EMR vendors stepping into the certification process with their APIs, or is this targeted to only API developers?
Great question. I would imagine that well, first of all, it's not targeted at just the API developers. EHR vendors are definitely on the list, and for them to be able to trust the apps that come, in a sort of standalone Fire launch, we really want to make sure that this ecosystem helps you trust some of those. For the ones that are tightly coupled to their EHR, they often have a fairly proprietary way to sort of vet what's going to be part of their ecosystem. But as more and more organizations move to sort of a freestanding, Fire launch that's adjacent to the EHR and they want to control their own little ecosystem, we see this sort of fitting that really well. But I'll ask Lee. Lee, have you got any EHR vendors yet who've sort of signed up?
So we have it's a good question. So we have a TDRAP steering committee, and that steering committee has about 10 different organizations that are part of it, that are providing guidance to us. And two of the players are Epic and Cerner, are on that steering committee. So they've been providing very good guidance to us as far as the development, and they are definitely supporters of that accreditation process as well, Tim. So that's what I can tell you as far as involvement. So those are two pretty significant players in the EHR realm that we felt was very important to be part of this process and giving us guidance on this.
Great question. Thank you.
Good question.
We got another one. Oh, wait. Are there any efforts to work with Direct Trust to stand up a clearinghouse to utilize Fire endpoints for health, human, social services providers, and health plans and clients and patients, consumers to send secure messages, i.e. replace fax, phone calls, and snail mail?
So I would tell you that we've worked with Scott Stewie and Direct Trust. We have a great relationship. ENAC has a great relationship with them, with Direct Trust. We provide the privacy and security for their HISP, CA, and RA accreditation programs. And we've, Scott and I believe Direct Trust is very much a supporter as they've been going through and evolving their framework as well of the TDRAP program too. So we're continuing to be in discussion with them, and if there's other aspects that we can look at with Scott and the Direct Trust team, then we will certainly be open to figuring out how we can look to do that.
This is we're welcoming all comers. We need this to work for us as a big, happy, trusted community. So, but we don't have we're not a long way down the road with them yet. But
Our intent is to be very inclusive.
I got another question here. It's, do you have any pre-hospital EMS vendors signed up? The idea is to connect pre-hospital to hospital. The gap to date has been trust. Don't know of any of the actual pre-hospital vendors that are sort of sitting around the table, but happy to talk to them, knock on their door, and explain, you know, kind of what we're all about. Other questions folks have? We're right at the top of the hour. We'll take one more before I thank everybody. If anyone's got a burning issue they wanna jump out and ask. Going once. Well, look, thank you all very much for your time. Lots of great opportunities for follow-up. Lots for us to learn as well as sort of things progress. Big thank you to Lee and Todd. And we'll be sure to sort of follow up with sort of the emails on how to get to things and get to the talk, etc. With that, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your afternoon and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.